Hi, Darren Mangum here, the PPM Attorney. Today I wanted to talk about Regulation S and how it applies when you're doing a private placement memorandum, or in particular an offering, say, under Regulation D, and how the two work in conjunction with each other. Um, Oftentimes, especially in today's world, there's um, lots of opportunities to bring in investors, not just from the United States, but also overseas. Now, most of our clients are U.S. based clients, but we do have numbers of clients that are overseas. Regulation S is an exemption that covers offshore transactions, meaning outside the jurisdiction of the United States, when it comes to selling stock or offering investments. And so what basically Regulation S says is that you can, as long as it's an offshore transaction, it's not done within the jurisdiction of the United States, and it's not directed to any U.S. persons, and as long as those purchasers make a covenant to not to resell those securities back into the United States on behalf of any U.S. persons, then an exemption from registration applies, meaning that you can be free. You're free to sell securities. You're not subject to the securities laws of the United States. Well, I say you're not subject to. Certainly, U.S.-based issuers can rely upon the exemption, but as long as all of their investors or all of their non-U.S. investors are offshore, then certainly they can claim an exemption. The key thing to note is that it's not an exclusive exemption, meaning that you can have other exemptions apply. And now let me explain how that works in the real world. Typically, you have an offering. PPM. You're not really sure exactly where your investors are going to come from. You want to be able to accommodate investors from just about anywhere. And so certainly, like say under Regulation D, for example, say under Rule 506B or 506C, those are obviously exemptions that cover U.S. investors. And so, typically a PPM is structured for that reason. But what about non-U.S. investors? What about activities offshore? Well, typically, you may have investors that come in offshore that may or may not fit within the parameters. And there's my phone ringing off. Sorry about that. That may or may not fit within the parameters of, say, Regulation D. However, if the transaction, and this is important to have inside the subscription documents, if the subscription documents make representations that, look, this transaction, if you're a non-U.S. person, and obviously you have different definitions of what a non-U.S. person is, if they fit within that, then the transaction is deemed to be is to occur outside the United States, and that no directed selling efforts were made from the United States to that person, and so they're able to rely upon Regulation S to cover that transaction. Now, bear in mind there are securities laws, all over the world. There are most developed nations have their own securities laws, and so it's important to make sure that you're complying with not just U.S. securities laws, but also the securities laws. Let's say in India, or let's say in Brazil, or let's say in Europe, you're expecting a number of investors in those jurisdictions, and let's say you are having selling efforts directed toward those jurisdictions. You definitely want to comply with the securities laws of those particular jurisdictions. Again, really, Regulation S is meant to cover either transactions that 100% of which occur outside the United States, like all of your investors or foreign investors, like say an EB-5 program, for example, or let's say you're doing a cryptocurrency offering that's not directed to any U.S. investors, not available, but it's 100% offshore, then yeah, certainly Regulation S would apply when it comes to the U.S. securities laws. but you still want to make sure that whatever jurisdiction you are soliciting in is you're compliant with those securities laws. If you're selling in Germany, for example, and you're marketing the securities to German investors, then yeah, you're going to need to find an exemption that covers that. It's really meant to cover your incidental investors. That again, there's no directed selling efforts, at least from the United States, to those persons. And so, again, that's the first type of example. The second type is if you have, again, a combination Regulation D or Regulation S offering that say, hey, all of our investors in the United States are U.S. investors that are coming in under Regulation D, and any non-U.S. persons that are outside the United States, we have paperwork that really illustrate the fact that that transaction is occurring offshore and that they are in fact non-U.S. persons, and so Regulation S would cover that transaction, right? So the nice thing about Regulation S is, again, that it's non-exclusive. You can have it compatible with Regulation D and perhaps other jurisdiction or other exemptions that may be applicable. So anyway, happy to discuss that in further detail with you. If you do have U.S. or non-U.S. investors that are coming into your deal, certainly we want to make sure that you're covered. So anyway, hopefully this video is helpful. Feel free to like this video or subscribe, and thank you for watching.